Oh, Heather, are you still the host?
No, that would be,
Heidi isn't on anymore, though.
I'm not on. Yeah.
Says you are.
It says you are.
That's because she logs in as.
Oh, that's Heidi. Heidi, can you pass over? I just assumed that was you.
Yeah.
I can't record until we get that.
She's probably starting like 6 meetings right now.
I would, if you wouldn't mind, yeah. Otherwise, I can't, or just start the recording, because I can't.
Well, it shows now to do updates.
Off to a good start.
That always happens to me when I'm logging in, it's like the last minute. I'm like, recycle. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that they have the link. What's the reading ID on the agenda?
909-174-0347. Perfect. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
There we go. All right. It is 7:03 on Wednesday, March 22nd. I am calling the Finance Committee to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. In accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link attached in the agenda that's been posted to the town calendar, or you can call in on the toll-free number that's also listed. This agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Are there any announcements from the committee? Okay, I just have two quick ones, so we'll get them out of the way now rather than at the end of the meeting when we're all half asleep. First one is the the Association of Town Finance Committee meeting. The spring meeting is actually happening on April 29th from 9 to 1 in Stowe, Massachusetts. It's It's $25 to go. I believe we are spent out of our account, but we can go for $25 if we want to. I'm planning on attending again. It's just going over the budgetary stuff from the town. Everyone else is welcome to go as well. The other one is the Boys and Girls Club is doing their Are You Smarter Than a Sixth Grader fundraising event on April 28th, the night before, from 7 to 9 p.m. At the middle high school. And last year, the Finance Committee came in a crushing second place finish with a perfect score.
Under protest.
But they have asked us if we would be willing to put forward 3 or 4 of our members to go again against some of the other town groups. So I told them we would discuss it. We can certainly do that later on this evening.
Recording
but-
stopped.
Oh, geez.
Recording in progress.
That we would go over it later on and see if we can come up with a few of us. I'm happy to go again. And if anyone else is, it's certainly for a good cause. With that, we can move right into our new business for the administration, unclassified, and debt service presentation from town manager. Pull up the slides.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What's up? All right.
We are ready to go.
So I think I'm a day ahead. It's actually March 22nd, not the 23rd. But so we'll start right in to the general government budgets and what's covered under general government. It includes Selectmen's Administration, Town Manager, Finance Committee, Town Accountant, the Annual Town Audit, Legal, Assessors, Treasurer Collector, the Town Clerk, which includes also the elections and registration and census budgets, Information Technology, which you already heard the presentation on, and Land Use, which includes Planning, ZBA, and Conservation, which you heard their budget presentation as well. For Selectmen's Administration, there are only 2 changes. One is to increase the hours from 28 to 32 hours a week for the Assistant Town Manager. And the board and committee clerks, based on historical spending, we found that we're using about half that amount. So that one's reduced by about $4,432.
Are all the boards and committees, do they have clerks now? The ones that want them?
All the ones that requested ones, I believe, have someone in place.
Okay.
For the town manager budget, there's no changes from the target budget. Finance committee increased the line item for meetings in school by $500. And that's so more than one person attend conferences. It's something I've seen over the last 2 years a need for. The town accountant budget, there's an increase in the cost of supplies, and this is based on inflation as well as historical spending. They also see the number of the tax forms and envelopes has increased as well. The annual town audit, that estimate is based on the fiscal 24 costs for the audit, and that includes for our annual audit as well as the audit for the school end of year report. And the 4,100 is the GASB 45.
What is GASB 45?
That's a requirement that we are need to do on, and this is more a Karen question. I think she's on, and this is one of her budget submissions. It's Government Accounting Standards Board, I think. Is that correct, Karen?
It is, but that's the OPEB actually.
Okay.
Thank you. For the legal expense, that is level funded.
You don't see a need for more based on the 40B stuff and,
We're under retainer with our town council that's been representing us through
Okay.
this.
so it can't go higher than,
Right.
okay.
There's no, like, yearly increase in the contract? on
There
that?
is no proposed increase from him.
And that's not going to affect the, going on beyond 40B to the potential abatement issues or anything like that
He would also represent us.
with this
Yes.
retainer. We wouldn't have to put anything else into it.
Right.
Okay.
For the assessors, there's a slight increase in the contracted services, and that's based on the vision and near maps software that we use, and dues and memberships cost those meetings. The treasurer's administration is the increases in the treasurer's salary line, and this is, it's a treasurer collector combined role, so increasing that role by 4 hours a week, so 36 to 40 hours a week for that role. So this is the treasurer portion of that increase. And contracted services, this increase is, as it says, a fiscal advisory fee increase and unclaimed property as advertisement costs. Tax collector, as explained, the increase for the hours per week for the treasurer collector. And just to add, this is, it's been based on a historical amount of hours that she's had to spend over the last 2 years. For the town clerk's administration, her increases, she applied basically an inflationary percentage. It's about 2% increase to those line items. So very nominal, you'll see bottom line. As well as the elections for the salaries for the election workers. The registration and census and the salary for the town clerk, there's level funding from the target budget numbers, and for the salary, that was a 3% increase. So the health and sanitation, I included slides that weren't, because they typically don't come in front of us, the Board of Health and veterans. So just to go over what is covered under the Board of Health budget, we're part of a regional health district with a number of other Neshoba Valley towns, and Neshoba Associated Boards of Health services include food inspections, recreational inspections, housing, investigations, Title V related work, private well permits, rabies clinics, nursing visits, home health aid visits, and rehabilitative therapy visits, and communicable disease investigations. For their budget, and these two highlighted lines are associated with Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, which they, the budget increased by 7.5%. And this was based to reflect inflation that they've seen throughout the economy, and also the tight labor market that they're witnessing with hiring staff. So they felt to keep competitive wages for their staff. Those were part of the reason for that increase. And that's an assessment that's issued. For the Veterans Administration and Benefits, these are all level funded amounts. We currently have 10 different veterans, widows, and families a month that are issued benefits. Looking at the unclassified budget for health insurance, as I think I've said, I don't know how many times, we started off with a 8.5% increase as an estimate for active employees, 5% for retirees. We received our actual rate increase, which was a 6.2% increase for active employees and a 5% rate increase maintains for the retirees. The overall increase for actives and retirees is more than a 6.2% and 5%, and that's based on the changes in actual enrollment numbers, which is compounded by this year. Earlier in the budget process, we identified that there would be a deficit in the health insurance line in fiscal 23 that would be able to cover within the operating budget, but that only compounds the issue in fiscal 24. And the next slide is the breakdown for active town retirees and school retirees. For other categories under unclassified, our workers' comp and liability insurances are estimated at a 5% increase, which equates to $15,137. Our police and fire injured on duty insurance is a 5% increase, which is $3,093. Medicare costs are estimated at a 6.4% increase, which is $20,510. Our assessment for Montechusett planning is $104 whopping dollars. Our salary reserve estimate is increased from $64,000 to $100,000, and that's to account for the collective bargaining agreements. We have the clerical and the fire union to negotiate that expire at the end of this fiscal year, as well as our salary administration plan employees. The training line is increased from $2,800 to $15,000. That's something I talked about during the preliminary budget presentation as more of a need for training, it's an identified need. And the other categories under unclassified, which include band concerts, life insurance, insurance cost control, historical commission, unemployment, the reserve fund, town reports, and physicals, they were all level funded. Looking to our debt service, in fiscal '23, our debt service payments for the DPW renovations, the public safety building construction, and the primary school construction will be expiring. So a large portion of our MSBA debt for an old school project will be ending, and therefore we have an overall decrease of $979,711 that we will see a reduction in our debt schedule. The public safety building and primary school were both excludable debt projects, so we see that coming off our excludable debt amount. And the schedule for 24 does not include any new borrowing. This also aligns all within our debt policy, well below our thresholds. And just to highlight which projects, as I mentioned, the public safety building, primary school, they retire in '23, as well as the MSBA reimbursement for the primary drops off as well. The DPW renovations retires in fiscal '23. The school and high school heating system, which is old debt, excludable debt, retires in fiscal '24. The library excludable debt expires in fiscal '25. The artificial turf field general fund debt that was bonded in 2017 retires in fiscal '29. The ladder truck and Saliba property general fund debt retires in fiscal '25. The pavement management excludable debt bonded in 2020 retires in 2035, so ways out. The high school, middle school, high school excludable debt retires in 2045, and the Meadowwoods USDA debt retires in fiscal '47. So, and that is all I have for tonight. Any questions?
Put up the questions.
I have a question. So, thank you for this. From 22 to 23 on the debt service, do you know what the dollar amount, what the difference is between 22 and 23 in total debt service?
22 and 23. I would have to get back to you on that, unless Karen can pull that up right away.
I want to get a sense of what's getting freed up this year.
Oh, that's this year that's expiring.
Yes.
Those are the ones that I highlighted in the presentation. So DPW renovations, public safety building construction, primary school construction, and the MSBA debt that we usually get a reimbursement amount for. That's an old school project.
I'm sorry, what was the dollar amount? Is there?
$979,711.
Okay, got it. Is that in here, or is that just something?
It was, I think, on my slide, probably for the preliminary budget presentation.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you.
But in the line item detail, you'll see that in
Okay,
those amounts for the maturing debt.
got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
No.
None for me as well.
All right.
It's an easy one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the Monty Tech budget presentation. So I have a couple up here. Is it this one that's showing right now? Is this the presentation you wanted to show?
Say it again.
Is this the presentation that you wanted to show?
Yes, in general, we have one early presentation, and unfortunately, we forgot to send the PowerPoint for that. We do have hard copies for everybody.
Okay.
But yeah, then we'll switch right to the budget.
Okay.
Is this in our folder?
Is, yes.
Thank you.
First presentation is just overview.
Go into the budget for, yep, go into today's date, admin,
Just in case you were over there.
and then I put it into, since we're getting a few of them, I put it under budget. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Got it, okay.
All set, or?
Which one do you want to start with?
So we're going to start with the packet that has the
Got it.
snazzy packet there. This is quick. By the way, good evening. Thank you so much for having us. Tom Brown, superintendent at Monty Tech. Tammy Crockett, who I think many of you know, our business manager, will be doing the budget presentation. And I have to thank Barbara Reynolds, our longtime rep for the school committee at Lunenburg. She does a fantastic job, and I'm not surprised that she's here. So it's a great thing. Really just wanted to kind of give a quick overview of some of the things that kind of go beyond the budget. That we want to make sure that folks know that we're trying to do to make sure that we're doing our best, that whatever we can is that we're not relying just on the Chapter 70 local funds and everything else. So there's just some quick examples that I'm going to go through, but then one big new initiative at Monty Tech that we want to make sure we clarify. But if you're kind of working through the packet, the first packet has the kind of the green background there, page 2. So last year we got contacted by a national corporation who said, listen, we're trying to start an educational foundation. You guys have a community foundation. Could you kind of talk to us and work our way through that? So we showed them kind of what we have in place, let them know what we had going on. They said, well, we've never seen an application. What would an application look like to a community foundation? So we made a dummy kind of application and gave it to them so they could look at it. And they said, great, that lets us know. Now we know how to do applications. And oh, by the way, we're going to accept your application. And that gave us, as it says on the slide there, a $370,000 donation from this major corporation. Allowed us to purchase some saws, some planers for our house carpentry program. We're working on trying to install a new spray booth into our auto body collision program using that money. We work on grants. We're trying to make sure we're supplementing the Chapter 70 money as much as we can. The next example there on page 3, the Mass Life Science grant. This was a great opportunity for us to pair with Fitchburg State. For our anatomy and physiology class. With that class, we set up an articulation agreement. So if our kids pass that class, they can receive credits at the value of $1,900 from Fitchburg State that they don't have to pay for tuition. But even more importantly, it allowed us to buy some equipment. That image there in the bottom right corner is called an animatage table. Now we have one in our science program and one in our health occupations program. And that's literally a human cadaver, but it's all done virtually, where literally you can start off at the skin level, go down to the muscle level, down to the bone level, and everything else. The days of cutting up frogs are long gone, and the opportunity to get that using that Mass Life Science money was fantastic. You can see on page 4, overall, we're having a really good year. We've gotten $3.8 million in grants We're expecting, or we're hoping, we're about to apply for another Skills Capital grant for our culinary program. What we're focusing on there is the new trend in culinary that we all know, that because we're all having festivals these days, are food trucks. And we're looking to try to bring a food truck program into our culinary program so the kids can learn that aspect of the trade right now. But that grant's going out, actually tomorrow, that grant should be going out. But speaking of Skills Capital grant, a couple other examples there. This is work done to renovate our spaces using these Skill Capitals grants. The bottom left is our dental program. All that cabinetry work done by our house carpentry and our cabinet making folks. To the right, we were able to use the Skills Capital grant to completely redo our tool crib in our auto technology, which really helps the kids understand measurement and get to know the equipment very strongly. So really pleased with that. And again, trying to avoid not just using Chapter 70 money. One thing I try to do anytime I'm in front of any of our communities is we love to do projects, and we've done a lot of projects in Lunenburg, but we'd like to keep that going. We've met with them before and talked about trying to do some more. These are some of the other examples, but most recently, just 2 weeks ago, we had our HVAC and property maintenance program right out here to Town Hall. They brought their energy auditing equipment and their brand new thermal imaging camera to check out all the windows in this building to see how we're doing on the thermal energy staying in. It showed that there is a lot leaking out. I think we're not surprised. It's a historical building and everything else, and obviously the challenges of updating a historical building, but we were glad to be able to give Lunenburg that information using that data. So a couple other projects there. If you go to page 9, there's a pie chart there. One of the things I'm trying to do as I go around talking to our communities is to get rid of some of the myths that seem to be going around about Monty Tech. And right now there seems to be a myth going around talking about Monty Tech has 90% of their kids going to college and no one's going into the workforce and everything else. And that is just simply not the case. If you look at that pie chart, this is from our most recent graduating class from last year. And if you look at the blue sections there, for 2-year college, 4-year college, that's about 49% of the class went on to college. But then if you go to the right, the yellow section, about 45% of our students went on to the workforce. It's basically even. So this perception is completely wrong. And if you flip to the next chart, what you really have to think of, this isn't the table there. This is not your parents' vocational school. It's not just the old construction trades. You know, you look at our health cluster there, our dental assisting program, our health occupations program, our veterinary science. The kids in health occupations, when they graduate, they have a CNA. They could walk out and get a job immediately. If any of you are familiar with the medical field, you're not making a whole lot of money as a CNA. And for them to actually really profit from all this training, they need to go on and go to college. So it's no big surprise when you look and see that 20 of the 25 kids from health occupations are going on to college. It makes sense. But then if you go down to our construction cluster, 17 of our 21 electrical kids going right into the workforce, 10 of our 13 house carpentry going right into the workforce, 16 of our 17 plumbing going right into the workforce. The trades that you'd expect kids to go into the workforce, they're going into the workforce. But again, we have lots more programs, all our technology programs, those need to go into college, a lot of those kids. So when you do hear that if someone's saying that, you know, well, they're all going to college, yeah, we do have a lot going on in college, but it's because they're in trades that they have to do that. So we just want to make sure we're trying to clear that up, make sure everybody's aware of that. Speaking of that process, we have an obligation to prepare kids for both college and workforce. This year we were able to partner with Fitchburg State. We did a Monty Tech Day. They specifically invited our students to come over, tour their facilities, get to know their facilities. They did it by clusters. That was fantastic for our kids. But then we also have examples on page 12 where our co-op coordinator, Ms. Curry, takes kids out to companies in the area, PJ Keating, Beacon, Cadent, these are some examples, takes them on tours, hopefully hooks the kids up with either co-op jobs, which means they're going to the workforce rather than spending their shop weeks in shop, they're actually working in the field. Those were just some great examples that we had for those kids. Co-op itself, right now we have 176 kids out on co-op. Basically half our senior class is already working out in their field during their shop weeks, which is just fantastic. We're so appreciative of our partners that do co-op. Another important piece that we should let you know about is the training for adult workforce through CTI. It's called the Career Technical Initiative, and this is a state program worked through Commonwealth Corporation with the state. And basically, it helps underemployed and unemployed adult workers from early 20s to up to their 50s, 60s we have in these programs. It's a tuition-free program. They have to go through a process. They have to make a commitment in terms of attendance and everything else because this is a free program, but allows them to get full adult training in different fields. You can see on the page after there, page 15, we've done welding, we've done HVAC, we've done culinary, we've done electrical, we've done a lot of different programs. This allows them to get a step up into the trade, into the workforce. We just had our first graduation ceremony a couple of weeks ago. It was fantastic. Everybody, these older folks brought their families, their kids, and the celebration of it was wonderful. But how that benefits our day program is you do get these funds from the state that allows you to improve your shops in terms of the equipment that you have. So for instance, in welding, we were able to use this grant money to completely switch over all our welding stations in our welding program. All 16 units were replaced. So it's fantastic. It supports our school, our kids, and the adult workforce. And again, this is all grant money. Again, ways we're not having to rely on Chapter 70 money or anything like that. I gave you a list. There's some of our sponsors, some of the wonderful corporations that we work with, companies that we work with that help us do that workforce training. And then the last thing that I just want to go through is this Monty Tech Partnership Program. We think this is going to be a game changer in vocational education. When I became superintendent, this was my first year, I'm sure you're aware of that, but just in case, we went through and we spoke about, or what I spoke about was the fact that everybody knows we do not have enough space in our school to bring in all the kids that we want to have come to our school. This most recent freshman class, we had 850 applicants for 370 spots. So there's a whole lot of kids that unfortunately we can't provide vocational training to. So, and I know that if I picked up the phone and called Heather and said, Heather, we're thinking of doing a building project. Whittier Vocational just put in their MSBA project for $425 million. My guess is Heather might hang up on me, and I wouldn't blame her if she did that. So we're not going to get a bigger building. We're not going to be able to add to our building or expand to our building. The state came up with a great initiative, though. They called it a lab modernization program. And what they did is they dedicated grant money where you could renovate one of your shop programs, or even up to 2 programs if you wanted to. We took a look at that and we said, listen, in order to do that, though, you're going to have to shut down. I can't call up the kids at Auto Tech and say, we're renovating your shop all year, so we're closing your program for the year. So what we did, and this is a picture of it there, is we decided, let's go out and find a building we can lease. So about a mile down the road from Monty Tech towards Fitchburg downtown area is this warehouse at 270 Westminster Street. We are now leasing this building. We are going to use, we received a $1.8 million grant. 30% of that could be used to do the renovations. Our kids are literally going to go in and convert this warehouse into 3 shop programs: electrical, house carpentry, and plumbing. The grant will allow us to buy the equipment. So literally we've gone into our electrical shop, said we need to buy one of those, one of those, one of those, one of those, and bring it down to this warehouse and do all this work. What we'll do is we'll convert this into those programs, and we're not going to open those programs until this time next year. We'll have the adult workforce going at night, and then in the spring we'll have students coming. What we did is we looked at our districts that had the most kids on the wait list, and we're focusing on those districts first. So we're starting out with Fitchburg, Gardner, and Narragansett. And what will happen is those students will stay enrolled in their districts. They will not be on Monty Tech's rolls, but they'll be coming to us and coming to this facility to do their training. That way, Fitchburg, Gardner, Narragansett does not lose any money for kids coming into these programs. These kids do get, as Tammy will explain, as I'm sure you guys know, Chapter 74 money. That money will come to Monty Tech because that's specifically the money for the vocational training. We'll be using that money. We'll be using CTI money. We were not, the thing I want to make sure everybody knows, because as I would understand, is you're saying, well, Tom, we don't see Lunenburg in that list. We are not using any Chapter 70 local money to run this program. This will all be done through grants, through the student assessments that we get. That's the Chapter 74 money, CTI money, and everything else. Again, and those districts also get to pick the kids that they want to have. So any type of kid they want to have, it's from their alternative program, from their EL program, whatever. They can choose whatever they want to have. And we think this is an opportunity to get 80 kids, 84 actually, more vocational training. They won't have all the same skills that our kids have upon graduation, but they'll have enough to go right into the workforce. Any of you involved with electrical, you know it's all about hours. The electrical shop, they'll be behind. They won't have all their hours, but they will have the training that they'll have their 10-hour OSHA. They'll have some of their important certifications to go right into the workforce. And our hope would be that some of these kids would finish our program and then go right into the adult workforce CTI program and finish their electrical hours. And again, that's all tuition free. So we think this is called an After Dark program. This is a state proposal. They've had it. There are several regionals that are doing it, but ours is going to be the first one that happens during the school day. When we talked to these districts, they said, Tom, listen, our kids go do after-school jobs, and that money helps their family. They want to do football, they want to do theater, whatever it is. They can't do things after school, so we're doing it during the school day. Our buses go right through their towns. We have buses that go right through Fitchburg to pick up our kids. We'll just tell their kids the closest bus stop to your house is here, and we'll pick you up and bring you to school. We're going to use the same A-week, B-week schedule that we have. So we're very excited. We really think that DESE is going to look at us as a model to see how well this works and if it will work, and try to see if they can encourage other districts to do that. But when we want to do this, we're unveiling this program. We all knew that a lot of towns are going to be thinking, well, wait, we're not getting into this. Why are we paying into it? You are not. There's no Chapter 70 money going into this program. So that's just a quick kind of overview, because I know Tammy's here to do the budget. But if you have any questions or anything, I'll certainly take care of that.
Any questions on this portion?
And I'm sorry that we didn't have the PowerPoint for folks at home. All right.
Marshall?
Do you know how many Lunenburg students applied and were not able to get in? You said there were 800 and about 350.
Yeah, we have the total number of Lunenburg students for the
I have
enrollment.
enrolled,
but, yeah,
not applied.
Not for applied, though. But I might be able to get that for you before the end of on my phone. When I get back, I'll see. Oh, well, I don't have my phone. I left it in the car. So, but I can get you that information. I would guesstimate your waiting list is probably in the mid-teens, somewhere around there. Okay.
Okay.
Here, look. Sorry, I have your enrollment. Okay, well, I think a lot of you've seen me before. I'll try to be a little quicker than I normally am. I apologize in advance. So I'm going to talk about the Chapter 70 money and how that affects town assessments. So this is the PowerPoint that I'm going to be going through. So I'm on the first slide. I like to start because our budget is based on the governor's budget, as yours is currently. So I always like to start off by kind of giving an outline of what's happening there. So Governor Healy's budget projects a $586 million increase to Chapter 70 money. And they're also committing to funding the Student Opportunity Act again. That is where they said they're going to increase some of the foundation budget rates, the ones you see listed on this list, higher than inflationary rates. This year, inflation was capped at 4.5% for the foundation budget rates, even though, as we know, inflation is a lot higher. This will be the third year of implementation of that act, and they're looking to do it for 6 years. And it does cause some significant jumps to some foundation budgets. That's why I like to point that out. The next slide is Monty Tech's foundation budget as determined by the state. This is what I was referring to when I talk about rates. The items down in the rows 1 through 11, administration through special ed tuition, they allocate funding per pupil to each of these categories of your foundation budget rate. And again, that's what gets increased by inflationary factors. The columns going across is the different grade levels, and those get different rates for each of the rows. So preschool would be your least cost. Now, you don't see that for Monty Tech because we only have vocational students. That's where all of our pupils are. So that's the category we're in. But they do change as you go up in grade level, and vocational is the highest regular education cost that gets the highest funding. In this case, the 1465 in column 7 represents our Monty Tech's foundation enrollment. So again, to explain that, it's the students that live in our district communities, the 18, that are actually enrolled at Monty Tech. It also is the students that reside in our 18 district member communities that school choice to another vocational program. That also gets included in these counts by the state. And we have a Chapter 74 practical nursing program, and the in-district pupils in that program get allocated to this line as well. So that represents Monty Tech's foundation enrollment. Columns 8 through 13 are duplicative student counts, but they're called above base amounts. They give each district above cost for these categories because they're the special populations that require additional funding as well to provide the education for them. Column 8, special ed in district, that reflects a number of 72. That is not our actual special education enrollment number. Our special ed enrollment number is 236. What this represents, and the legend is down in the bottom left, so for a non-vocational school, the number they would put in there is an assumed percentage of 3.9%. For a vocational school, they put assumed percentage count in here of 4.9%. So that's what that 72 represents. Then the numbers going down are the additional funding for those pupils. We do not have special ed tuition out. You have to come to Monty Tech to be a student there. Columns 10 through 12 are additional funding for EL pupils. We are in column 12 because we are high school vocational. So we have 10. That is our actual enrollment of ELs for the year 10. And you can see the additional monies that factor down there. Column 13 is for low-income students. And what happens is we upload all of our students to the state. They do a match throughout their whole system of Mass Health, EBT programs, and they match those pupils. And if they do match, they get placed as a head count in here as a low-income student. We are considered low-income group 7, which is indicated in row 15. You can see, because our low-income percentage is 39.62%. So you can see the additional funding there. Column 14 is where everything gets totaled. Again, 1465, because that's our total enrollment. And then all the other rows get added up to the end. This is important to discuss because that added down comes to $29,486,021. That is Monty Tech's foundation budget for the year, or also known as our required net school spending. Again, that's the minimum we must spend on our pupils outside of transportation, debt service, and capital. But everything else, that's the minimum. When you divide that number into the 1465, they come up with a foundation budget per pupil. And that's the $20,127 that you see right below it. I like to point that out because I'll refer to it a couple times throughout the presentation. The next slide shows the summary. So it's a summary of our Chapter 70 aid and our other revenues. I like to point out the right side where it says comparison to FY23. So you can see our enrollment changed by 2 pupils to the 1465. It was a decrease. Foundation budget, you can see that's where the 29,486,021 is. I just showed you how that was calculated. That's a $1.5 million increase, or 5.55%. Becomes important in my presentation because we are so close to our net school spending requirement that we go up with this number, basically. The next row is the required district contributions as calculated by the state. That's the total required contributions for the 18 communities. And I'll get to the Lunenburg's individual calculations in a moment. Then simply the Chapter 70 aid is our foundation enrollment, and they subtract out the required district contributions from the state, and they fill in that gap with the Chapter 70. So that's where we see the $18,318,704. So we received a 6.38% increase to our Chapter 70 funds. Again, required net school spending, in our case, it's interchangeable with the foundation budget. Okay, so the next slide is the budget summary. So again, it's going to be kind of repetitive to the numbers I just went through. Looking at the proposed FY24 column, you'll see the net school spending requirement. We just saw that a few times as calculated by the state. Our transportation, that's $2,399,080. That's our contracted agreements with the bus companies to provide students transportation to and from school. We have 30 school buses and 3 vans. That's that rate plus our special education estimates. Our above net school spending is $150,000. So that's some operating expenses that are above that required, not $29 million. That is 0.5% above. It's very lean. The following 2 items, capital budget equipment and vehicles, combined total $500,000, which is an increase in total by $15,000 over this year's capital budget. We try to keep our combined capital and vehicles to between the $450,000 to $500,000 mark each year. So what we're doing with our capital is we had a facilities assessment done, a conditions assessment done a few years back, and we're trying to hit the high priority items that are mid-range, so that we don't have spikes in our assessments to our communities. So we're focused on those items. That brings us to our total budget, $32,535,101. That's a 5.64% increase, which is in alignment with our net school spending increase of 5.55%. So that's why I think it's important to outline those. The next item is our Chapter 70. I showed you how that was calculated by the state. 18,318,704, which leaves the required minimum contribution portion of the assessments from all our communities, $11,167,317. The next section here, again, transportation and other, that's from above. That's the total of the transportation and the above net school spending added together. We're subtracting revenues that we anticipate from that. Estimated transportation aid, that's from the cherry sheets that come out with the governor's numbers. That's the $1,700,000. We're also proposing $75,000 from our regional transportation fund. So as a regional school district, we get reimbursed a percentage for our transportation costs. So we anticipate, like this year, FY23, of receiving $1,549,256. If that funding comes in higher The school committee votes to put that money, the additional monies, into this regional transportation reimbursement fund. Then what must happen with that money is it must be used to offset communities' assessments for transportation in the following year. We start the year out very conservatively because as of right now, what we're budgeting for FY24 use, we don't know the number yet because it will be based on our final receipts of FY23. That will change when we do the final budget, or it'll stay the same if that's all we get extra. So that's really a conservative ballpark. The next line is the committee's proposing to use $250,000 from E&D to offset this section of assessment. So that brings this section of assessments for our total communities of $524,080. The next section is the capital budget, as I showed you above, vehicles and equipment, $500,000, and the committee's proposing to use $200,000 from E&D for this. So that's a combined total of $450,000 from our excess and deficiency account, which, you know this, but just for the benefit of people, it's similar to free cash that a community has, excess and deficiency. At the bottom of this slide, I show you our excess and deficiency balance that's been certified by the Department of Revenue. It's $1,006,541. So we're proposing, the committee's proposing to use almost 50% of that. A regional school can have up to 5% in that account, and you can see it's holding right now at 3.1% till we bring it down. So all those combined brings a total assessment to all of our communities of $11,991,397. or 5.63%, which mirrors our budget increase. The next slide shows you the functions of where that spending is coming from for the $32 million. I want to outline or discuss some of the higher increase lines to you. So again, for salaries across the board, this covers COLAs, steps, columns for all staff throughout the salaries, throughout all the functions. Also, a large increase you'll see under the instructional section, Function 2000, is textbooks and instructional materials. We have about 5 programs, one of them being Spanish, that we haven't bought new textbooks for, or online computer textbook series since 2011. So that's a large increase. We're also getting some geometry, algebra, and science textbooks. But that alone does not make up the increase. Going back to Heather's presentation, inflation. Our shops are significant consumers of food, welding gases, lumber, wire, plumbing supplies. We're seeing increases of 20+% of our consumables in our programs alone. Also within this line is a piece of instructional equipment for our auto tech program. It's an electric vehicle, hybrid vehicle trainer, which is approximately $55,000 of this increase alone. We need to, that's the train that's coming, we need to make sure that we keep our kids trained on those vehicles, because that's what we're seeing a lot of these days. Again, another large increase is student transportation. So in here, you'll see it. This includes all our transportation. So that's before we provide buses at 4 and 6 o'clock, so that is also built into this. We also have our athletics and field trips built into that line item, and affiliation buses. It's not like on the first page where I just showed you our to and from school transportation costs. Another pretty significant increase is employee benefits. Again, going back to Heather's presentation, we're seeing a 6% increase in our health insurance, which we were kind of pleased with too, because we were anticipating it could be up to the double digits. So you're never pleased because that goes up significantly quickly, but still happy to see that. So that's where that increase comes from. Okay, and then just gonna move on to the next slide.
And ask a
Stop
question.
me if there's a question.
Yeah, so, it looks like the largest line item is teaching services, and it's gone up by 4%. What's the future of that look like? So I'm just
Sure.
asking about salaries here, basically, right? That's
100%. So that actually is in alignment with the COLA that we gave this year, which was 4%.
So
Yep.
when you look at future years, is that going to be consistent? Do you know? What do you think?
Yeah, our collective bargaining agreement that was approved was 433.
Okay.
So we will see that increase to those. Not quite that level. This is not additional staffing either. This is step movement. So when a teacher's there a year, they automatically move down to a higher bracket. And if they get more education, they move across to higher brackets. So this has all that in play as well.
Okay, so that contract is for the next couple of years? now?
Yes, it actually begins next school year.
Okay.
We were just able to sign that. We knew with inflation, the committee knew with inflation that they were going to have to show them a larger contract than they've given them over this current year was 1.5%. The year prior was 1.5% too. But with inflation being what it was, and with strikes on the news every other day, the committee said at this time, we feel like it's the one time, or at this time, we can provide those increases
Okay.
to keep the staff. Because Heather talked about the DPW having a hard time finding staffing. It's hard for school districts as well. We're seeing some staff shortages, especially special education and whatnot.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Your school committee members get paid?
No, our school committee members do not get paid. The budget that's in the school committee section is they do get reimbursed for travel to and from meetings, or if they do professional development, like the school committee conference at the Cape. Also in that line, we put our overarching dues for the school district, so our NEASC accreditation fees, other fees that encompass the entire school district, gets put in the school committee section. They do not get paid. Any other questions? Okay. So the next slide goes through the foundation enrollment numbers for each of the communities in the town, within our town. So you can see Lunenburg increased by 3 students in foundation enrollment to 97. The next so that's how your operational assessment gets apportioned, and you'll see the percentage on the next slide. The right-hand column, school attending children, that's the children in your district that are eligible to be in grades 1 through 12. We don't include kindergarten because that wasn't a grade level when the district agreement was signed. So we received that information from your superintendent of schools office. So you can see Lunenburg's number, 1654. This has 2 purposes. This is the basis for your capital apportionment of our budget. It also determines your freshman class quota for the upcoming year. So the school committee just approved a freshman class quota of 365. I was afraid I get that wrong. 365. So Lunenburg will represent 6.53%. I moved to the next slide now with the percentages. Lunenburg will represent 6.53% of the freshman class. That will be your quota. So you can see also here, you represent 6.62% of our operating. And that's how those are determined. The next slide,
So is that driven by state guidelines or school committee guidelines?
for your quota,
Yeah,
that's driven by the district agreement. That's between the 18 towns and the school. There's a regional agreement, district agreement put in play, and it's outlined how a quota is to be established for each town.
okay, and how does that get negotiated?
That was put in place in 1965-ish, when the district was formed.
Okay.
So, the quota is, the freshman quota is determined by the school committee in terms of room we have at the school. So we try to keep the enrollment at the school at 1435 throughout the 4 grade levels. So looking at how the freshman class will affect the other grade levels, the team puts together the recommendation of the quota. It usually ranges year to year between, I'll say 360 and 370, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Brown. That's usually the freshman quota. It stays pretty consistent, just within that 10 pupil fluctuation. And then it's always based on your school-attending children population determines your quota. Yep. And if you want, the district agreement is posted right on our website, or we can have it sent over to Heather so that you can take a look at it, the document. Okay, the next slide shows from the state. Again, it's a breakdown of the foundation enrollment from each of our community members, as well as the required minimum contribution. So you can see here, Lunenburg went up from 94 to 97 pupils, and your required minimum goes from $1,012,282 to $1,127,113, or an increase of $114,831. This is the portion of my presentation where I say, please don't shoot the messenger. These are the state's numbers. And I know that you guys have welcomed state representatives before to have this discussion, so I know you understand how this works. But I'm here to discuss the numbers.
Has your school had open dialogue with all of the state delegations that represent your district?
So, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear your first statement.
So I guess, has the school committee or the school did something like we just did, where we invited all the state representatives and senators in to discuss the issues facing the district, the region?
So I'll say no to having them into the school, but yes to Superintendent Brown attends. Fitchburg State hosts a legislative breakfast roundtable in the area, so that Central Mass superintendents attend that, and they invite all the legislators to come to that. And it's specific on budget, and they specifically have these conversations about. And really, one of the reasons, too, is that the state is now funding, through the Student Opportunity Act, larger increases to the foundation budget. So those are going up quicker to keep up. They're trying to fix in 1 to 6 years, maybe what's been lagging for 20, and it's kind of happening very quickly for a lot of communities, large increases.
I don't think the state knows how to fix something. I'll just say that. So I think that they come out with these formulas that work in certain circumstances, but are very bad in other circumstances. And I think Lunenburg and towns like ours are always on we get the short end of the stick portion of that. And I think we've spent a lot of time as the finance committee, now the school committee, and the select board in raising these concerns to our representatives. And I think that having these same conversations where you have 16 communities, I think you said, right? Is it 16?
We have
or
18, we have 16
communities,
towns, 2 cities.
several of which are in a similar situation probably to Lunenburg's.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
And there is a need, I think, for a fix to this. Because
Right.
I kind of go through this budget every year and I'm like, it's great, but in the end, like, there's nothing we can do about it. It's all
I
formulated.
agree with you, I really do.
And I'm
Yeah.
very supportive of vocational
Absolutely.
education.
Yeah.
You know, we talked a lot about like the millionaire's tax
Mm-hmm.
and how that's going to be earmarked, I doubt it, but towards education.
Right, Right.
Vocation education would be a great opportunity for that, right?
right.
But to fix kind of these things that ultimately arrive at unfair assessments in the view of at least, I think, our community.
I wouldn't disagree with you. It's, they're trying to fix how schools spend, but they're putting a lot of the burden on the towns.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. So the next slide does show you how the state calculates, which I know you're aware, but I like to go through it anyways for those that don't. So this is specific to Lunenburg. So they take in rows 1 through 3, they take the equalized property valuation, so they're using 2022 data. So you can see the numbers they have in there for your valuation. The uniform property percentage, 0.3534%, that's uniform from every community, A to Z. They use that same percentage to come up with what the state calculates as the local effort from property wealth. So in Lunenburg's case, they've come up with $6,556,563. The next section is the income of the citizens, 4 through 6. So they're using the 2020 income. You can see the number. And again, that uniform income percentage is used through every community, A through Z, and that's 1.5329%. So they multiply that out and they come up with Lunenburg's, what they calculate as local effort from income, $7,977,885. For row 7, the combined effort yield, they simply add 3 and 6, the efforts from property, wealth, and income. And that's how they come up with 14,534,448. Row 8, FY24 foundation budget, that $22 million number represents Lunenburg's share of the foundation budgets of all the school districts you belong to, so Lunenburg, Public, and Monty Tech. That's the 22 million. The maximum local for row 9, 82.5%. Every community, no matter how wealthy, the state gives at least 17.5% state aid to them, even if they can far exceed funding their whole school. So they calculate what that would look like, 18,657,111. In row 10, for the total local, for the target local contribution, they take the lesser of row 7 or 9. So in this case, the lesser is row 7, what they combine to be the actual, what Lunenburg could actually afford per the state. That's the $14 million number. Then what happens is we move over to row 13. They say, what is Lunenburg? What is their required minimum contribution this current year, FY23? What's currently $12,346,684. Again, that's to all your schools. Municipal revenue growth factor, again, that's calculated by the Department of Revenue, and as you're well aware, it deals with the levy limits and new growth, et cetera. So that's different for every community. They've calculated that for Lunenburg to be 3.60%. And they came up with a preliminary contribution in row 15, $12,791,165. They compare that to row 10, what they say Lunenburg can afford. And they say, oh, that's a shortfall. So we come down to row 24. It's a shortfall of $1,743,283, or 7.71%. In row 23, you can see If it's between a 2.5% and a 7.5% shortfall, they add 1%. If it's a shortfall greater than 7.5%, which in this case, they add 2%. So what they do is to get to that 246,934, they multiply 2% by your current FY23 required contribution number, row 13. That's where they get the additional 246,934. So they add that number to row 15, what they calculated to be your contribution for this year. And that's where they come up with row 26, $13,038,099 for Lunenburg's FY24 required local contribution. The next slide shows you how that 13 million is to be allocated to the school districts you belong to. So I'm focused now on rows 5 through 9. 1 through 4 is the current fiscal year. 5 through 9 will be how they'll apportion FY24. So you can see row 5 is the 13 million number we just saw calculated. Row 6 is your foundation enrollment for each of your schools, Lunenburg and Monty Tech, and you can see the numbers. The foundation budget is Lunenburg's share of the foundation budget for each school. So in Monty Tech's case, it's the 97 pupils times the 20,712 or 127, I've said so many numbers, that I showed you on the second slide, which was our foundation budget calculation. That's how they come up with the 1,954,986. They do the same for Lunenburg, it's just a different number for the per pupil. Then they say what percentage of the whole is each of the schools. Monty Tech represents 8.64%. So they take that percentage into the $13,038,099 figure, and they come up with the required contribution for Lunenburg to Monty Tech, $1,127,113, which is an increase of $114,831. And you can see the Lunenburg numbers as well, how it affects you for your public school district. The next slide is a breakdown of each category, so it's easy for you to see the changes in your assessment. So you can see FY24, the foundation budget, the required minimum contribution, we just saw how that was calculated, and that goes up $114,831. The transportation and operating, again, that's your percentage of that total. I showed you where it was less, it was our operating costs less the revenues applied to it. So the $34,700 would be Lunenburg's share of that. The capital piece is the 500 less the 200,000, so the net 300,000. That's Lunenburg's apportionate share of that number. That brings to a total assessment $1,181,390. And you can see how it affects your payment per pupil from the town. So it's $12,179 per pupil. And most of that is driven, as we just discussed, by the required minimum contribution determined by the state. The next slide is just an outline of everything I just went through specific to Lunenburg throughout all our 18 communities. So it just breaks it down again, foundation enrollment, budget, their portion of each of the segments, and the total assessment, and then you can see the change year over year from each community. And then the following slide that I usually like to end on is just to give you an idea of where your vocational school is, Monty Tech, in terms of all the vocational schools in the state, in terms of per pupil spending. So we're in middle of the pack at spending approximately $22,000 per pupil. And that is my presentation.
Any questions so far?
Yes, I have one question, I guess, on, back to, and maybe superintendent needs to answer this, but
Sure.
when you talked about 800-ish, I thought you said 800-ish applications and being able to accept 300 and,
Six-
Past freshman class, there was 850 applications for 307
So
how does
was-
that compare to other vocational schools around the state? Are we seeing this,
Oh, yes, across the state, all, I don't want to say all, but the vast majority have large wait lists of students because there's just way more demand than there is for spaces.
okay, so, okay. And then with students that are accepted, you said there's 800 applications. Are there some that get accepted, probably, right, that choose not to then?
Yes,
come
so we
forward?
still have, so we did change our system of how we handled the wait lists and everything. So what we switched it to, but what happened in the past, and we realized it was affecting our communities negatively. So what we originally had was students would be on the wait list based on their score, what their total score was on their application. And so a student may leave, say, you know, I decided to not accept it, so we would take the next person off that list. The problem is we walk in here, Tammy's been talking about foundation enrollment and everything else, and what the quota is and what you expect. What would happen then sometimes is we would start taking kids off, and we'd be adding kids from your town that you were not expecting to be budgeted for, because they were above and beyond the quota because they're now coming off the wait list. Several towns would get extra people. We decided that's unfair to the towns. So the way we do it now is if somebody declines their acceptance after we've offered it to them, we take someone directly from that town. So the only time that you add somebody to our enrollment is if somebody from Lunenburg leaves. That way you don't have to worry about, 5 Fitchburg's kids leave, and just because of the way the scores are, we're taking 5 more Lunenburg kids.
Well, I'd
Now-
prefer 5 Lunenburg kids to go in. I mean, my preference would be that, if a student in town wants to go to Lunenburg High, they go to Lunenburg High.
Yep.
If they want a charter school experience, they get to go to a charter school.
Yep.
If they want to go to a vocational school.
Sure.
Or a magnet school, or whatever, I mean,
Yep.
that school choice is really school choice.
Yep.
But with all these lottery-based systems, it seems that there's more demand for those lottery-based schools than seats available in those lottery-based.
I mean,
With vocation being.
yeah, for
one
vocational,
that's-
there's pretty much all regional vocational still use the selective criteria. There's only one that chose to use a lottery.
Okay,
Yeah, so everybody else is still using the selective criteria, including
Okay.
us. Yeah,
okay, but so you see in general across the state,
Oh. absolutely.
there's about half the seats as what is needed for vocational.
That's probably a good guesstimate. I mean, there are Essex Regional up on the North Shore, they'll get over 1,000 applications for their district, so, yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
no worries.
Thank you.
No, I just wanted
Questions
to,
for me? Okay.
one
Hang on, just
question,
in case.
so, just a process question. Is this all one spreadsheet?
Yes, it is.
Is it really? What a spread, my hat's off to you. No, I just wanted to say thank you, really thorough presentation. This is the first time I've seen this. I'm still relatively new on the committee, and it was very clear, all the numbers made sense.
Good.
And so just from a process standpoint,
Thank
thank you. Really appreciate all the work, and I'm sure went into this.
Thank you very much.
sir. Appreciate
And that's, thank
Very
you,
clear.
because that's exactly what we want, is
Very
these are big numbers.
Yeah.
We want to make sure you feel good. You might not like them, but that you feel comfortable with where they came from.
Yeah,
So
thank
thank
you.
you.
You don't have a restaurant, do you?
We do.
You do?
Yes,
When's it
yeah,
open?
part of our culinary program.
When's it open?
It's open pretty much every day of the week, from basically around 11:30 to 1
One.
o'clock. Yeah. It's very reasonably priced and excellent food, and come on down. Go right around to the back of the building, and the restaurant's right in the back of the restaurant. There's parking available.
Nice.
Any other questions?
No.
I don't have any. Thank you very much. This is
Once again,
fantastic.
thank you very much as well.
Would you like a cough drop?
Sure.
I knew I was going to need it tonight. Excuse me. All right.
We're on schools now.
We are on the next school. Excuse me. All right, we are a little bit early, but I'm fine with it if you guys are. Since this is your second meeting of the night. There's a couple. There's 4 of them in there. It's under LPS.
Yeah, which one?
Oh, this one is FY 2023 0316 FY 24. Then we've got some ESSER updates as well.
Don't have anyone in waiting rooms, right?
I've been admitting them as they've been coming in. Nobody right now. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. Then I don't have to mess it up. Should be able to share now, I think.
Forgot my wireless mouse. It's all right.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Alrighty, so we're going to move through the first portion of the slides rather quickly. For anybody who's interested, the full presentation of the slide deck was presented in January at the January 4th meeting of the school committee, and then again on March 15th. Both of those are recorded, both of those recordings are posted. So anybody who wants to see additional detail on the presentation of the slide deck can view there. So we always frame our thinking around budget development around execution of the mission for the Lunenburg Public Schools, which is to provide all students with the skills, confidence, and passion for lifelong learning so that they may find their own paths to successful careers, active citizenship, and rewarding lives. We also focus our budget development around the strategy for continuous improvement, and there are 4 key objective areas, one around transforming teaching and learning, one around communications and operations, another around cultivating climate and culture, and lastly, equity, access, opportunity, and achievement for all students. In our presentations, we also typically provide additional data for context. So the next series of slides provides you some background data around class sizes, around the number of students receiving supports for behavioral or mental health, the number of students that we are servicing through IEPs or 504s, those additional supports. Again, just background data to allow the community to see the data that we do have access to and the things that we look at as we prioritize the budget development.
The internet's unstable, it says. Great.
It's a lot like TCP,
Huh?
unstable internet. You'll also see in the slide deck that we do include the latest MCAS results. Again, it justifies the need to be focusing on some academic interventions.
I'm gonna download it.
Okay. We also provide some background around the fact that our assessments around academic need are not based solely on MCAS results. We do have standardized local assessments that we use as well. And we report the results of those assessments 3 times during the year to the school committee. Once in the fall with the fall benchmark, once again in January with the winter benchmark, and again in June at the end of the year. We look for both student achievement, performance levels, as well as growth, which is really important.
Do you want me to present it just for now?
Not getting any connection, I don't know if,
Are you trying to log on to the guest one or to the?
The
can-
guest.
That is the one that's open.
Okay. Let me share my screen.
So I'm just going to jump in.
That's fine. Which slide do you want me to go to?
How about the 2022-23 grants, the slide that has the state grants, federal grants, and the ongoing COVID grants? Again, that's just to summarize for everybody where we are in terms of the grants that we are also using to support operations for the school district. So again, as we look to develop a budget, our priorities around meeting student need, and that is largely what we look at the data to help us understand, as well as aligning with the strategy in those 4 objective areas that I outlined previously. We've also included slides that outline the process that we engage in. Our process begins in August and proceeds right on through to mid-March with the culmination of a budget hearing for the school committee, vote and approval of a budget by the school committee, and then a presentation here for the finance committee. So let's get to the recommended budget. This evening, we held the budget hearing. It was originally slated to occur last Wednesday evening, but we felt that with a quarter of the town still without power last Wednesday evening, that we opted to delay the hearing, the budget hearing, until this evening to allow everybody to recover from the storm and attend and view the presentation and participate in the hearing if they wanted to do so. So this evening, the budget hearing culminated with a vote by the school committee, and the budget that you have before you this evening was voted and approved earlier this evening by the school committee. It is a 2.5% increase budget. The personnel lines are an increase of about 3/4 of a percentage point, and the non-personnel up almost 7%. We also like to provide in the slide deck a historical look at the percentage of the budget that is funded through Chapter 70 versus the local budget. The budget that you have before you this evening includes all the contractual increases, including any step increases, longevity, or degree advancements. It includes a health insurance increase of 6.2%, and that's based on new employees and current enrollment in the health insurance plan. It also includes the increases for our general education transportation based on our contract. And this particular budget includes new positions of a humanities teacher, so that's somebody that would be certified, licensed to teach either history, social studies, or English language arts, or in many cases, we find that there are folks who are dually licensed in history and English. As well as a secretary position. That's a partial FTE new to the budget this year. It will be partially funded through our special education grant. This secretary position would pick up our, what we call our process coordinator functions. Right now, stipended teacher positions are covering that, and we're finding it to become, it's become more of a challenge to fill those stipended functions. This process coordinator schedules all of the special education IEP meetings, as well as organizes and schedules all of the evaluations that have to be done as part of the eligibility process for special education. This secretary position will take on the responsibilities of registering students new to the district. Currently, that happens at the school level. So if you're a family and you have a a student that would be primary school age and Turkey Hill age, you have to work with the secretaries at 2 different locations to register your children. This would move to a more centralized registration process, and this secretary would also, as part of that registration process, set folks up with bus transportation at the same time. And will support day-to-day requests, changes, and so forth relative to transportation requests in the district.
Would they also handle query checks as well, or would that still be done at the individual levels?
The query checks are actually processed through my office.
Oh, they are. Okay, so they're just gathered at the individual
Yeah,
levels.
so if you're, let's say, a parent looking to volunteer at one of our schools, you would fill out the query paperwork. If you're looking to be an employee in the school department, you would fill out that paperwork. The schools, if they are the ones that are soliciting volunteers and have that paperwork, they forward it up to my office, and we handle the query checks from there.
Okay.
So we did include a slide because we think that it's important for everybody to be aware that there were positions that we included in our 5-year staffing plan in year 1, which would be next fiscal year, that we are not funding through this local budget that is before you this evening. There are several positions that were part of that 5-year staffing plan year 1 that are going to be funded through other funding sources. So we currently have a targeted math teacher at the high school. Again, that's to support kids who are struggling with math. It has previously been funded through ESSER 2 grants, and the school committee has approved maintaining that position and funding it with ESSER 3 monies for next fiscal year. The same is true with the Tier 1 SEL counselor position, currently funded under ESSER 2 and approved for ESSER 3 funded, as an ESSER 3 funded position next year. The psychologist, this is a role that's important in the function of special education. The psychologist does all of the, or much of the assessment for students who are being referred for evaluation for special education services or need to be re-evaluated to be deemed eligible to remain on special education services. We'll fund that position with a special ed grant. And lastly, there's a position of licensed practical nurse, an LPN. We have currently an LPN on staff right now, but in order to maintain that position, we would be looking for some alternate funding, Department of Public Health grant as an example. But if there's no funding source available, then that will not be a position that is filled. When we presented the budget originally in January.
Can I ask one question on just the targeted math? I know in the past you had something at the elementary levels with respect to trying to increase math aptitude. Is that in place now?
That's a big question, it's a big answer, but the short answer is yes. We have developed our own internal system of tiered support. So if you were to go to the Department of Education website, they refer to this as multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. These multi-tiered approaches apply in the realm of academics, and also in the realm of social, emotional, behavioral health. We have structures and systems put in place. We have staff that can support at Tier 2, Tier 3. Again, there are 3 tiers. Tier 1 is for everybody. So that's your school-wide approaches to behavior. It's your classroom level instruction. Kiddos who maybe need some additional supports would get those support at a Tier 2 level. Might be some small group work. If it's in the realm of mental health, it might be in a small group session with a counselor. And then tier 3 would be for that more intensive support, whether it be academic in either reading or math, or that more intensive need for counseling supports as well,
Okay, so you have that covered
system-wide.
system-wide, okay.
System-wide. We have at the lower grades tutors that can support students' academic needs through this system of supports. It gets to be a lot bigger challenge to work with a tutor model during the school day with a high school where students have 7 classes a day and they don't travel as a cohort. Your schedule of 7 might be very different from mine. So the need to have this teacher for math who could have a smaller group of kiddos that struggle with math, smaller class size, you've been identified as needing additional support in math, that's what that position supports.
Okay.
Again, when we first approached the budget and presented back in January, we had intended to move away from contracted service for our IT management back to an in-house IT position. We know that amongst our IT staff, which is very, very small, we have phenomenal technicians, but we don't have anybody with that network administration strength and background. However, as we've navigated through these last few months, after much discussion with school committee and internally, we're withdrawing that for the time being. We would like to come back at that again next year, but for one more year, we're looking to stay with a contracted service for our IT management.
It's the same one as the town has, right?
Currently, yes, it is.
All right. I think they provide phenomenal support, so I'm kind of against moving away from that model.
There are some benefits to having our own internal. The way the contract model works, we only have folks on-site physically a couple of days a week. If I could get us back to a place where I've got somebody that's on staff every day, they participate as part of the leadership team, they're part of guiding, advising, counseling, researching options for us to improve operations, improve instructional practice in a classroom. There's a whole host of benefits to having somebody who's physically present and actually part of your leadership team versus a contracted out service. But they have brought some benefit. They've remedied a few challenges that had been ongoing for us. So we're very grateful for that solution that they provided. So anyway, that new position, which was going to be an offset in the budget, not an added cost, it would have been the monies that we were paying for the contracted service would have been put back into a salaried position. Another staff adjustment, we've got a large group of students that are advancing through the district. We would need a new 5th grade teacher, but we would decrease the number of 4th grade teachers that we have and just move the FTE to follow the larger class.
Out of curiosity, since I have a child that's in that bubble, what happens in 6th grade?
The FTE is going to follow.
How
The
far?
FTE is just-
How far is Miss Salona going to go? She's wonderful.
So we move the FTE, not necessarily a specific
Right, no,
teacher.
But how far up is that? I mean, is it?
It'd go all the way up until we get to high school, because once you get to high school, you've got electives, you've got a variety of classes, so that students can be assigned across a variety of classes. It's not that that challenge with a limited number of teachers.
Okay, so we should expect to kind of see this for the next 4 years.
Exactly.
Okay.
We did provide you a breakdown of school staffing by school. Total number of FTEs, the FTEs that are teachers, the paraprofessionals or our teacher aides, and other staff. We've also given you a slide that breaks down those school staff that are what we're calling the non-local budget school staff. So
Do
these
all of our
might,
staff make minimum wage?
no.
Why?
Why don't they make minimum wage? Because they've often been here with years of service, and there are increases that go with time in service.
I
You're
mean,
talking about like the paraprofessionals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
They
no-
make under minimum wage is what?
No,
That's what I'm asking.
no.
Everyone makes at least minimum wage.
We adjust our non-affiliated salary schedule to keep pace with what's required.
Not asking what's required, because I know what's required is not minimum wage. My question is do we pay at least minimum wage for every, we do? Okay.
There's an hourly rate that we pay our substitutes, and then there's the daily rate, which falls within the minimum wage. And that was changed by the school committee, and they set forth that schedule a few years ago to keep up with the minimum wage.
Okay.
We've also given you a few slides that break out staff by the areas that they support. So you've got a slide that shows you the staff for our multi-tiered system of supports. You can see by the titles of those positions, we're talking about academic supports there. So we have 2 reading specialists, 4 tutors, a math specialist, and our Title I coordinator, who also serves as a literacy specialist in the district. And you can see that those positions are all grant funded currently.
Do we see that those grants would continue? Do we anticipate that those grants would continue?
So the grants for these, Mr. Cassidy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the reading specialists and the literacy specialist are covered under our Title I, the math specialist as well, or still on ESSER?
The math specialist is.
Still on, partly on ESSER. You can see there's a .5 notation there. And tutors as well.
So the .5 is ESSER? Or how many are on ESSER? FTEs on this?
Do we have a break? We have that in another, when we get to the ESSER grants, we can break that down further for you then.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Sure.
Okay. We also have a breakout for you relative to the staff roles and the number of those staff providing SEL supports in our schools. So our guidance counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and we also support a software platform for confidential data records. So our nurses, as an example, use SNAP, but all of our counselors also use SNAP as a platform to track notes for the students that they're servicing.
That level is what you want it to be, or what it needs to be at, or
The SEL?
I guess like the social workers and the psychologists and the,
If there were another funding source available to us and I could hire more of them, I would. We have a lot of children with some significant challenges in the realm of mental health. We have seen a significant jump in the number of students requiring hospitalization related to mental health. And we have seen some students hospitalized repeatedly during the context of a school year. So the mental health needs are significant. So yes, if there were more monies available that we could secure through another funding source, we would absolutely be happy to have additional support available.
Do the 5 float amongst the, like just the float amongst the schools, or are they kind of dedicated to schools?
They're largely dedicated. Right now, we've got 2 down at the primary school, 1 at the Turkey Hill, 1 at the middle school, 1 social worker at the high school. But in the guidance department, we also have one of the counselors who is licensed as an adjustment counselor. That's a clinical license. So she does provide some clinical support to the kids in need.
Is there a plan to address the increase at this point?
We're doing everything that we can. We have staff that support the kids in their transition back to school after a hospitalization. They have access to counselors scheduled, right? Not just, oh, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to pop into the counselor's office. That's that tiered support that I was talking to you about earlier, where some kids need a level of support that's a group session. Other kids might need a one-on-one. Some of these kiddos that, have been hospitalized and are returning, they're going to get that level of support, which may end up being stepped down over time if they're successfully transitioning back in to school to a group session versus a one-on-one. But we also have classroom and teachers set up to help kids transition back to school when they've been out and hospitalized for mental health. We put other strategies in play so that their classroom teachers are aware of different accommodations that can be made to provide some additional support for kids so that they can stay in a classroom setting and they can avail themselves of the curriculum in a classroom space so that they can learn. But honestly, that's why the mental health needs are so important to meet, because if they can't physically be in a classroom because the mental health condition keeps them from being in a classroom, or when they return, their level of depression, anxiety, stress is such that they can't cognitively be available to learn, it's a challenge. It's a significant challenge. And it's not a challenge that's unique to Lunenburg. This is everywhere across the nation.
Are the trends continuing to go up, or is there any positive movement after kind of the COVID lockdowns and the stress that brought to the society?
This is what we're seeing now. There was a need prior. There was a need prior. It has been exacerbated by COVID. And what we're seeing now is the result of that exacerbation. This is not something that is likely to turn itself around in another year, and all of a sudden we'll be back to pre-pandemic levels of need for mental health, nor will we be back to pre-pandemic levels of need for academics for some of the kids. Because again, for many of these kids that are having this significant level of struggle, mental health-wise, many of them are falling behind academically because we need to address the more critical need of their mental health first. So there is going to be that lag for a bit of time for some kids to get really caught up,
Okay.
unfortunately. So again, there's a slide in here that shows you year one of that 5-year staffing plan, and basically everything either being incorporated into the local budget or funded through grant sources. The only one not in either of those categories is a dean position at the high school. And we put that in when we presented the budget in January because there had been a recent change to the discipline laws that require more documentation of discipline require more effort on the part of a school to provide a restorative justice or a progressive discipline approach. In other words, sometimes discipline can be addressed as a teachable moment, but what does that look like? Who's teaching about that behavior that needs to be corrected? So not knowing at the time in January, because the state promised some additional guidance in January that eventually came, I believe, sometime in February. But it seems that largely we tend to be on track with what they're looking to shift toward. We are exploring some other resources for a more restorative justice type of approach. As an example, a student gets caught vaping in the bathroom. We're looking at curriculum, online modules that students could be required to participate in and complete as a first wave of a disciplinary action for that kind of an infraction. The goal here is to move schools away from automatic suspension. Now, there are some situations which still would warrant an automatic suspension. A danger in the school, supplying drugs in a school, that's still a suspension. That's not a teachable moment. Weapons in a school, again. But that's all clearly outlined in the law. But we just weren't sure what we were going to be facing in terms of the new requirement for documentation and so on. So we have, for now, withdrawn that request.
Which request was that again? I
The
lost
dean
it.
position
Oh,
at the high school.
Okay. Thank you.
We're able to absorb that with vice principals and whatnot with the current setup.
So some of it is happening already with the assistant principals. Again, we're just trying to explore what kind of structure we would put in place if, let's say, we wanted a student to complete an online module as, your first offense type of consequence.
Okay.
So we're looking into that, but right now we're feeling like we don't need to have additional staffing for that. We'll see how the year ahead progresses and the models that we put in and whether or not it's working and whether it's sustainable. We may have to revisit that, but for now we're feeling comfortable that we think we have a plan that we can work with.
Okay.
And then lastly, we've got some factors that are still unknown. Right now, there are two groups that we need to be concluding some negotiation with, as well as a couple of individual employee contracts. At this time, we don't have any knowledge of any additional grant funds that would be allocated in a non-competitive grant way. We anticipate that there might be more opportunities for some competitive grants, and we have pursued any competitive grant that we think would provide us some funding sources for resources that we need. But we're not anticipating that ESSER is sunsetting, and therefore there's another round of COVID impact type grants that will just be awarded to districts. We won't know for sure about our circuit breaker monies until the end of the fiscal year, but we're anticipating something close to a level funding on that. And allocations for our federal and state grants, like our Title I, II, and IV grants, our special ed grants. We typically don't learn what those allocations are until late July, sometimes even early August. But typically, if the state is anticipating cuts from federal grant funds, they usually give us a bit of a heads up to plan for something less than level, and we have not been so advised, so we're anticipating something close to level funding on those.
For the reserve budget, are those collective bargaining negotiations? Do we have
Yeah.
an idea as to when those might be done?
I believe that the custodial group and the cafeteria workers, their contracts expire June 30th. So we would be looking to wrap those up prior to June 30th.
Okay, so probably not in time for town meeting then.
I can't make any promises.
Okay.
It would be nice, honestly, to have it all wrapped up, but I don't know for sure that
How
we'll be able to
negotiations go, right,
conclude.
and timing.
So are there any questions relative to this budget? I know there were other topics that you wanted to cover tonight.
So, what's the budget assume as it relates to busing? That everyone will receive busing, or if you live with,
No, so the contract that we have now is 11 buses, and the budget assumes the contract amount. The
Question-
policy has been changed. The school committee took up the policy.
what's the policy change?
Previously, there were mileage restrictions. They've moved away from the mileage restrictions or eligibility based on mileage. Essentially, it's their intention to bus all students K through 6. However, any students K through 6 still have to submit a transportation form by the deadline. Deadline would be May 1st. It is also their intention to bus as many 7th through 12th graders as we can accommodate on a bus. Again, families would have to submit the transportation form by the deadline. The thinking on that is that if we have a deadline of May 1st for all of those forms to be submitted, we then go clean up the list. You can imagine that sometimes parents duplicate efforts, and for the same child, we might get one parent submits it, but another parent also submits it, so we have to go through and clean up all of that. We organize the information in a way that is requested by the bus company. We get them that roster of students that have requested the transportation. They work on defining bus routes based on the roster that we have, location around town, how many they can fit on a bus, what's the bus route. They set all that stuff up. They would then provide that information back for us, and it's our intention that we would have that information so that we could provide that information to families early in August. So families would be notified, your child is confirmed and is on bus 10.
I guess my question is just more simple than that. I mean, we started
Are
this
we
year-
busing everyone? No. You still have to get a form in. If we don't get a form in,
Okay, assuming
go
everyone
on a
fills
wait
out their
list.
forms, are we gonna have a repeat of the beginning of this
No.
school year? Or is this budget support the services that the town expects as it relates to busing?
well, I don't know what the town expects in terms of services for busing. However,
Fortunate, because you sat through 3 meetings.
We
where
did.
I think they were very clear what they
We did.
expected.
but there were a few people who expressed the opinion that every student should be bused. We can't accommodate that without a significant increase to the budget or cutting staff positions. The school committee took that up over many months, looked at a lot of data, gave a lot of consideration to language around transportation. The truth of the matter is, even if we said that we would bus every student in town, there are still families that will choose to drive their children to school and pick them up. I can tell you that that is a fact because at the pre-K level, the primary school, it had been the prior policy that we bus all students K, 1, and 2. And we have a very lengthy car drop-off and pickup line at the primary school. So we know that not all families are going to want the bus. That said, given that, and given that we provided an opportunity for families in late August to submit a transportation form, there's not a single person who was not provided transportation that asked for transportation.
Okay, and this budget reflects that same situation will be in place this
That
year.
budget reflects that we have 11 buses, and we'll be able to accommodate as many students as we can fit on 11 buses. And again, given the fact that we have at least 100 students annually at the high school that request a parking pass to drive to school and park at school, those students won't be taking the bus. And again, knowing for a fact that even though all students at the primary school are eligible to get on a bus, they don't choose to. So we know that of approximately 1,600 students in the district, 100 parking passes, and the 1,300 plus requests that we got everybody who asked to be on a bus. So I'm feeling comfortable that we'll be able to accommodate the requests that come in. And because we're asking parents to complete this form early, the bus company can build their bus routes and bus assignments around where these students are located. That's the key. Last minute requests wreak havoc with our ability to put you on the bus on the route that goes by your house because you hadn't asked for it when the bus route was developed. So that's why it's really important to have this deadline for everybody to submit so that we know who needs the bus. We can get that information to the bus company, and they build their routes and bus assignments around where these students are located. So I feel comfortable that we'll be able to accommodate the requests that come in.
Okay.
Is the current bus contract, when does it expire? Is it 3 years?
We have 2 more years? This is year
The
one?
3-year contract, I believe, correct?
Year one of a 3-year, so we have 2 more after
Okay,
this.
so we have 2 years to kind of see how this works and reassess.
Yep.
Okay. If we do somehow get every student or every parent requesting that they have the K through 6 ride the bus, what's the process going to be if we do end up getting to a point where we have too many requests for the number of available seats in the 11 buses?
Yep,
Is there
it-
a backup plan for
Yep,
that?
it's spelled out in the policy, that it, there's potentially a wait list if the bus is full. And it would be based on date and time stamp. So we have families submit bus, it's a transportation form. We call it a transportation form, not a bus application, because there are other questions in that form that give us a lot of other information that we need. Car rider, pickup, drop off, walking home, going to extended day, which days, morning, afternoon, the whole 9 yards, so that we have information over the summertime so that the administration can plan for arrival and dismissal procedures based on actual information. So we ask for every family to fill out a form for each of their children. But those forms, again, coming in by a deadline, will make all the difference. If we have more requests than we have bus seats, it's that date and time stamp. And
Submit early.
Submit early.
Got it.
Make
Don't do
that
what I did.
deadline. But yeah, and what we do find sometimes is that parents will make the request for a bus, and then in the end, they decide that they're not going to avail themselves of the bus. So we can periodically through the year withdraw people. There's an open seat, and we can move somebody from a wait list on.
Okay.
We don't anticipate that that's going to be a challenge for us, but that's the plan.
Can Can you talk about your capital requests and kind of how you're doing on the ones that are, you received last year, and then the forthcoming ones, and where you see challenges as to where the line may be drawn right now? And
So let's address the current year one. So at the school committee meeting on the 15th, we talked about a plan for providing cooling at the primary school within the budget with the funds that were secured last year at town meeting for that capital project. As you know, when we got engineers in and we were told that no, in fact, you can't rely on using the equipment that you thought that you were going to be able to use. And with inflation, the price tag went from a few $100,000 to $7 million. Even the architect, the engineers that we were working with, they send their specs out to have it, have a cost estimate. They were shocked by the number that came back. All they could say to us was, the market's gone insane. It was nothing that they anticipated either. So when we look at, well, what can we accomplish to at least attempt to address the original intent of the request for the cooling for the building. We looked into and are proposed to the school committee, and they're on board with this alternate plan to install mini splits. So each condenser unit would feed 2 classrooms. With the monies that were allocated for the AC project in last year's town meeting, we can cool about 2/3 of the classrooms with the monies that were allocated. And then we would have to make a plan to phase in installation of units for the additional classrooms over time. It does provide the cooling, it does provide a better learning environment in a classroom, particularly on the second floor. The building with the gables, it traps heat. The second floor, particularly the section of the building above the main office on the first floor, not good airflow there at all. It's a lot like being in an attic when it gets really hot. So that would be the priority, second floor and the south-facing sides of the buildings on first floor would be the priority to install the cooling.
Is there an estimate on the operational cost relative to that solution?
No, I didn't run the estimates for the electric bill. I don't have that information for you. I can attempt to estimate that and get back to you.
Yeah, it just seems that though, I mean, I don't know how many units you're talking about, but, you know, and I don't know how many days you typically would need to run them, but.
Yeah, typically we only, kind of get the hot and humid spells in June and sometimes in September. Most of the rest of the year, even if it's warm, it could maybe even be unseasonably warm, it's manageable. But we have had stretches of several days well into the 90s, and once the humidity's in the building, and that's part of the significance of having the cooling units. It's the humidity that's being removed from that environment. When it's hot and humid, we have had days where staff and students have gone home feeling ill because of the heat conditions in the building. So we wouldn't be running them all the time.
Yeah.
Have the engineers taken a look, and are the units that they're recommending able to, I've assumed that so we don't end up with another $7 million bill. Have they kind of looked at the square footage that they're trying to actually cool, and the estimates that they're giving would actually cover those units to cool
Yeah, because
those
they know
rooms
the
enough?
size of the classroom spaces that the units would be in.
Okay.
Yeah. The challenge for us, I think, more comes down to the length of run and the access to the electrical, and, but they've taken a look at all of that, too.
Okay.
And then that was the projects we approved in the past. What about for this coming year's requests?
So the request that we had put forward really primarily focused largely around safety and security upgrades. One of the projects that we put forward was a safety security upgrade, but it was also going to be an energy efficiency impact as well. We were looking to put film on the glass. The film helps prevent the glass from shattering with an impact, but it also reflects the solar heat. So it would have facilitated some energy efficiency in our buildings, particularly our oldest building, the Turkey Hill, where the glass really wouldn't have much of an energy efficiency to it at all. The other projects were around replacing the Turkey Hill exterior doors. The doors are older, very similar to the doors that we have at the TCP building. The latch and lock mechanism is older. It's not always reliable. We want to make sure that we can secure the perimeter. You need to have a reliably latching, locking door. So that was one of the requests, and that was coupled with building out a vestibule at the Turkey Hill. All of the other buildings, they have, one door that you access, but then you're in a vestibule. To get into the building, you have to gain entry through another door. Turkey Hill, if you can get in that first door, you're into the building. So just as an added buffer, to build out a vestibule underneath the canopy at the front entrance of the Turkey Hill, puts another set of doors as a barrier to entrance into the building.
Is that on both sides or just one?
We were talking about one because that's where we have the buzzer
Right.
to let people in. The other side of that front face of the school is, we don't have a mechanism to unlock the door and let somebody enter.
Okay, so it would just be used for the buses as you normally do at this point?
Yeah.
Otherwise it's still closed?
Yep.
Okay.
We were looking to do upgrades to the access equipment. So the locking mechanism, the key codes to set alarms, additional cameras, security cameras in some of our buildings, again, Turkey Hill being one of them. The fire alarm replacement, the whole system, as you know, or I think we talked about this in the fall. We had a failure of the panel, the fire alarm panel, that we realized when we attempted to do our first fire drill the week that school opened, just prior to the Labor Day weekend. And then we had a fire watch in the building 24/7 through the Labor Day weekend until we could have the company get in there on Tuesday after the long weekend to swap out the panel. And then everything was operating again. But the original strobes, the alarm pulls, et cetera, they're all older. So this would be a whole system upgrade replacement. We had a request for funding to have some engineers in to study the wall around the turf. If you haven't noticed prior, next time you're out there at the turf field, there's a large concrete block retaining wall behind the bleachers, underneath the press box, and it's leaning in. We assume that that's because there's water flowing behind, putting additional pressure and shifting that wall over time. So it's not an imminent threat, but it is definitely something that is going to need to be addressed. And we really don't have a sense of what the price tag would be attached to something like that, because we really don't know how extensive it will be to repair. Might be an easy fix that doesn't cost a whole lot, or it could be we've got to rip the whole thing out, deal with drainage issues, rebuild it all. We're just not sure. So that money's to do that study and get a cost estimate for and a scope of what that project would entail was one of the requests that we made, and the other request was for a pickup with a plow and a sanding unit.
Did you speak about the security doors at Turkey Hill?
Yes, the replacement of the exterior doors.
So the top of those on your list is the security doors or the fire alarm or?
So really, when the school committee talked about it, when we initially presented the list in the fall, was the film on the windows was our top priority.
Over the security doors?
Yes. The security doors was a very close second. And then, not too far down that list, was, the upgrade for the access and the cameras, all tied into that security upgrade.
And you
So
think you
there were a
can
lot of priorities that were
make close.
very, very close.
Okay.
It was hard to identify 1, 2, 3, 4.
Any other questions on this board?
Anything to add?
I mean, we're prepared to speak about ESSER funds. We also provided a quarterly report in your folder for just the way we're spending our money this school year. And I think that's all we provided. And obviously, we would like your support on the capital project for this year, the 238 for the
AC.
the AC project on it, the primary. So,
Are there any questions on the line items that we have as well at this point? I appreciate you guys putting this together. This is exactly what we were
Yeah.
looking for this.
so you do have a line item
Yep.
totaling our request. But in addition, you have our quarterly report
For the current.
for the current year with details on that, so.
Can I ask, the salary line was less than 1% growth. Can you just comment on that? How did that come together?
So a couple things. We shifted some of our positions to grants.
Okay.
In addition, there's a hiring, not a practice, but there's a hiring trend. We're hiring a lot of new teachers. So then, really, teachers with 1 to 2 years experience, replacing teachers that are outgoing with 20 plus years. So there's a huge salary difference between those replacements. So it really is impacting the budget. And as I say, it may impact collective bargaining agreements moving forward. Same with paraprofessionals. We're hiring a lot of new paraprofessionals that are coming into the educational system. So with that, we're saving considerable amount of funds.
Okay. So is there any reason why people are leaving or retiring, or is it just a general, I mean, I know that's kind of happened across the country in the last few years, but is there anything more than that? that you
No.
can?
When we think about our teachers, they're largely exiting the district when they're retiring. We have had, from time to time, and we did actually last summer, have some folks exit the district to pursue administration opportunities in another district because there weren't current opportunities for them here. We occasionally might lose a teacher who has a more lengthy commute and has started a family with young children, a lengthy commute. So when they can find something closer to home, they might opt to take a position closer to home. But by and large, we don't see a lot of turnover. You know, we hire people in, they're here for 5 years, and then they move on to something else. We don't typically see that. You know,
ESSER funds have created a lot of new positions, not only in Lunenburg, but all throughout the Commonwealth. So some of these positions are teaching positions, and as Dr. Burnham said, administrative positions. These are great opportunities for people to move up into other positions. So that may not be impacting Lunenburg so much, but I know it's impacting other districts considerably. So ESSER funds, and at the end of next school year. I mean, it goes through September, but technically, you know, the positions will probably end around June 30th. And I think there'll be a lot of people looking for jobs, and I think, I'm not saying that salary and wages account will go back up, but there'll be more qualified teachers available for our positions that we'll be considering.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Just one thing on athletic salaries, athletic coaches went to zero. Is that a mistake?
The funding for those positions are going straight to the revolving account. The funding that that is generated through fees are going to be paying the stipends, or you know, the payments to the coaches.
Okay,
So
so
we moved
fees
that-
are
we moved
totally
that-
covering that now?
Yep.
Okay.
For the general transportation, with the contract that we have, is it meant to increase by about 3.5% every year?
Yes.
Okay, it's not, okay. It's not level funded. Got it, okay. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for the presentation, obviously, but also all the work that went into it, going all the way back to August. So, thank you.
thank you.
Absolutely, thank you very much. This is fantastic. He's been on all meeting. All right, now moving into the regular part of our meeting at 9:30. Do we have a town manager or finance director report? She's still awake. She might have stepped away. Bless you.
Bless you. So I'll start from the other night. The select board just updates that I gave them on a number of different items. Start with the good news. The DPW director received notification that the grant he applied for the school zone traffic calming speed sign was received. So that will be going, the location will be Oak Ave for that.
Where's that going?
Oak Ave,
Okay.
Oak Ave School Zone. The LED streetlight project, I've been working with the consultant that was hired. He was hired to do the audit of all the inventory of the streetlights, to put together the incentive application that gets submitted, which we received $33,500 in incentive funds. That's the estimate right now that they give us when the project is done. That final sign-off goes through, so we'll get the final amount then. The equipment order, I submitted the order on March 10th. The expected delivery is 6 to 8 weeks for the equipment, for the LED fixtures. That's through the state contract. And I'm working with the consultant on the RFP for the installation. For facilities and parks updates, the Town Beach project for that went out to bid is complete. There is additional work that needs to be done that was identified, including part of a ceiling that wasn't within the original scope, and some exterior to the building where some birds are getting in. So that needs to be wrapped up and will be wrapped up before the beach season begins. The director is also lining up, this will start maybe even this week or next week, the McNally building. So after reviewing it with the building commissioner, the second floor was the part that was structurally not built to code. So, but the first floor is structurally sound and can be saved, and was actually a needed component because there's controls inside that building that need to be protected. So the second floor will be demolished and we'll be retaining the first floor this time. He also secured an architect for the Ritter ADA ramp and building envelope project. So that was the architect that we originally hired for that project retired. So those specifications and the drawings need to be updated to resubmit our application to the APDC for that project.
Separate of the windows at this point still?
That is with the
Or
windows.
including the windows?
Yep.
Okay.
The building commissioner needs to do a final inspection for the Lunenburg Central location. That's the large warehouse on Leominster Shirley Road. And once that certificate of occupancy is issued, that would capture any new growth from that project. So, and that would go towards certification in the fall if it's done, as long as it's done this year. And the planning board reviewed and interviewed 3 firms for the master plan, and the award went to a company called Over Under out of Boston, and that total award was for $153,000. So that, if you remember, is 2 different capital articles, because they found it more cost effective to do all the chapters at once.
What was the total capital we had put towards it?
So from the first article, I think there was $43,000 remaining, and the second article was $110,000.
Okay,
So it was pretty much our maximum limit for that.
Imagine how that works.
Yeah. The police department, this was discussed at last night's meeting, because the list of projects to be submitted to our delegation was discussed. So departments submitted requests. I put together some potential projects, and those were discussed by the board and decided upon 4 categories to submit. One of the projects that I had on the list was for the police department's security system, because it's been experiencing critical failures. So instead of waiting, the board decided to put this as an agenda item next week to vote on using ARPA funding for that project, so that can get addressed immediately.
What was the value on that?
The quote, right now we only have one quote. It's around $82,000, $83,000.
Okay.
The Council on Aging Director auctioned off a steam table on Municipid. Got a whopping $525 for the 10-year-old table. So that just goes into the general fund.
A what table did you say?
A steam table. It's a food
Oh,
tray, steam table.
okay.
And the police department is auctioning off the 2016 Ford Explorer. That vehicle had over 168,000 miles on it. It was our last gas Ford vehicle. So we'll see what we get for that. Mass Development, One Stop for Growth. Last week submitted two, it's called Expression of Interest applications. The land use director put forth one for Leominster Shirley Road corridor to do traffic improvements along two intersections along that road. So this will give the town feedback from Mass Development on an actual application that would be due June 2nd. And I submitted a project request for real estate technical assistance to help. Mass Development would provide technical assistance to draft a request for proposals to sell 925 Mass Ave. So that was the next step in that process.
Leominster Shirley Road, would that be down by the warehouse? Is that where?
The two intersections are at Reservoir and Fort Pond Roads.
Okay. So is that in anticipation of trying to do something with that corner? Or?
Yes, yeah, as far as making, because obviously Lunenburg Central going in, that there was a turn lane added. That was part of that project as part of what went through the planning board.
Yeah.
But knowing there's potential other development, the property across the street is being looked at for a large warehouse as well. So knowing that there is an area we want to make sure there's plenty of traffic, safety.
That corner is just a
It's a very
disaster waiting to
difficult,
happen.
yeah.
Especially with 18 wheels flying down there now.
Is there any plans to repave the area of 370 Leominster Shirley Road?
That I'm not, I don't know the answer to that, so I'd have to,
Because I travel that road regularly, and this storm that we had over Christmas with the excessive rain, the right travel lane became a pond, a little ice pond,
okay.
that then became potholes. So the swale, the mitigation that they've done there for the drainage, I don't believe is sufficient. But the road in general, since they've added that lane, is uneven and wavy, and it's the whole, that whole section really needs to be completely repaved. Because when I drive down it, I don't even use the right travel lane. I straddle it because it's so lumpy.
Okay,
And you
I
can
can bring
see-
this up to the DPW director. 270,
No, 370
370.
where the new warehouse is.
Okay,
And I think before any occupancy permit is issued, that issue needs to be addressed. The road is really horrible.
I wonder if they've done final paving to that.
Oh, that's why I was asking,
Yeah.
if there's a plan, because I see it was striped.
Yep.
But the whole road really needs to be completely repaved.
And they may have done temporary striping on that, because they, I think, hired that out directly through them for
I
that
think they're gonna continue
area.
to have drainage issues with all the water running down that road on both sides.
Yeah, I may email you after to get all these details to forward on.
Okay.
The Public Employee Committee Agreement, that's an agreement the town has with all the public employee groups, like, so it includes a representative from different bargaining units, as well as a representative from retirees, and that determines health insurance. It's our health insurance agreement, basically, with the units. And we're looking at, as far as the last agreement that was signed, we said we'd investigate doing research on a health insurance opt-out plan. And so that would be essentially looking at different parameters. Sometimes those plans look like you have to be on the town's insurance at least a couple of years. Then if you opt out, you'd get a payment of a certain amount. But some are structured, if you had an individual plan, it would be one amount, a family plan, a different amount. And the savings, both the employee sees a savings or the payment, and the town would see savings on the plan, the employer share of the plan.
Does that go into like post-retirement as well?
Good question. I think it'd probably be just actives, but that's something our consultants putting together for us.
Okay. And is the schools looking at that as well, or just the?
That would cover the schools because they have representatives from their units as well in the Public Employee Committee.
And that should be also offered as an option to new employees. before they
They
sign
would
on.
be, yeah, it would encompass anyone who's benefit eligible for that. Mhm. But again, that would all depend on the parameters. So a new employee might have to be on the town's health insurance for a set amount of time before opting out as well.
Where's the decision-making on that? Does that have to go before the town, or is that just? at
It
the
goes
select-
to the vote of those members of the Public Employee Committee, and then signed off by the Select Board.
Okay.
30 School Street, I don't know if everyone heard the news, but the project schedule is out. So they're working on all the preliminary stuff like DEP notification because of the hazardous materials abatement portion, permitting, and they should be starting site work within the next couple of weeks, and that's site work preparations. Then going into the abatement phase, and then demolition. And the project end date right now is May 8th. So not too far around the corner.
Will PAC televise the ball?
Well, it's funny you say that. They asked if people will come and watch, and I'm like, yes, they will.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
They'll set up lawn chairs and, yeah. History in the making. The tax assessment service update, we've entered into an agreement with Municipal Finance Services, LLC. They're out of Stoneham, and that is for the authorized amount up to $10,000 for that contract. And they began doing inspections this past weekend as well. The RFP is due tomorrow for the remainder. It's the same scope of services, but due to the contract amount required to go out to bid for that. So that's all I have.
Do you know if they're going to be doing, after they do the inspections, are they going to be addressing the abatements at that point, or is it going to be kind of just one group at the end?
They'll be doing inspections and providing recommendations on
To the board.
valuations.
Okay.
Do we know what the snow and ice deficit is at?
Good question. I hope to have a number for you tomorrow because I asked that question to the DPW executive assistant.
Have we hit seven
So
figures
she's,
yet?
after last week's, it's going to be significant. And we will probably not be able to cover it with just pavement management. And so we'll be looking at that. I spoke with the finance director today about that as well. So we need to sit down and come up with a plan.
There was no snow in Aruba.
Well, we wish we were in Aruba. That's for sure.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Brochu, anything from the finance director?
No, I have not.
Excellent. All right, moving on to old business. The committee report, or the finance committee report, which I put a due date on here finally on the agenda so that I don't have to keep looking it up. I went and looked it up again. I have not made much progress on it. It's been quite a long week, so my plan is to work on it tomorrow, and I'll get something for the meeting tomorrow at least so we can talk about it, because we have to vote on it by the the 30th. Any other discussion on that based on the topics that we have? I still have the ESSER funding, the overlay account and free cash, debt capacity spending, ARPA funding, the tax issue, and state funding with the millionaire's tax in the budget. But I think that's probably enough for
If you
now.
want to send me anything in the interim,
Sure,
I could kind of do some reviewing and
sure.
adding and editing.
Okay, that sounds good. Any other topics we want to include or strike at this point?
I mean, I think for both schools, there's nothing overly noteworthy this year.
I know there's a bit of a, there's a little bit of an upsetness that I've seen for the Monty Tech increase going up to, $100,000 increase, but
So, yeah, I mean,
looking at the numbers simply explains that one away.
well, I think that, yeah, I mean, I share the opinion that people should be upset by it, but there's really nothing we can do as a
Right.
community because we're disproportionately affected by it.
Right.
So maybe that just needs to be the explanation. It seemed like they just hit the minimum funding level on it, so after that, it's a formula, and it's, I don't want to, we shouldn't be trying to get students not to go into the vocations if that's what they choose to do. In fact, I think best situation, every student in Lunenburg that wants to go should be able to go, but
I am a little bit concerned with the formula-driven process for land values, for property values for next year, though, with this whole issue with the taxes.
I don't share that concern because I think whatever the abatements say is just going to be the foundation for next year's assessment. So, I mean, you're going to have an individual assessment done if you did an abatement.
You are, but that's still going to come into the total, the total value of the town's property, which I think was like 1.8 billion at this point. So if the abatements aren't substantially or approved, we're going to have an increase in the overall property value in town, which goes as the top line in that equation that she was bringing up, which is the basis of your starting number.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to think about it. Maybe, I mean, it's like 10% of the homes in town, and proportionally across the whole state, everything went up, right? So,
It did. But this is based on last year's numbers, so if it's, I just worry about we may potentially have another increase similar or larger next year, depending upon how property values are end up at the end of the year.
is that the linear algebra you were doing earlier?
No, that was quantitative analysis.
Okay, yeah, no, I guess.
I
we'll
could
have
add that
think
onto
through
it,
that.
though.
I was thinking the same thing as we were going through that, but it's way too late to have that deep of a thought.
Could add in the Monty Tech increase, though. Anything else? Excellent. All right. Capital plan. At this point, Madam Town Manager, are we still sort of in the same position we were 2 weeks ago with potentially an additional?
Yes, there will be additional funds towards capital plan together.
Okay.
So when will we see that?
Right.
Well, the warrant just closed yesterday. Sorry. Yesterday.
2 days ago.
It closed Monday. I'm working on it. Because it ties into what we need for funding for any monetary articles at town meeting, what we'll need, if anything, for free cash towards snow and ice now, because we're not going to be able to cover it within the operating budget. Those are all the factors coming into play as well.
Yeah, I guess just to the point of having to write the report for the warrant next, it could have kind of be done next week, unless we have a special meeting.
Well, I've got it on here to do 2 other potential ones if we need to.
It couldn't be the 6th, right? And
It possibly still, when do we have to, When's the deadline, the drop deadline for votes to get into the warrant, or into the,
I don't
The
have that
recommendation.
handy. The select board was doing their final votes on April 4th.
so it's possible we could do it on the 6th. Look at the schedule real quick.
That doesn't give a whole lot of time, because I have to get the final version to the printer on the 10th. So that's
I
not
guess the
long.
hard thing for us is we have public hearing next week.
Yeah.
We would want to, if there is a public to hear, we would want to get their comments into it, understand the capital as a portion of that into the write-up. So I think having us vote and approve on that next week is a little challenging, but perhaps the 6th, we should have had all the discussions. I mean, I guess we could put TBDs in it, but that doesn't, and
That
do an
doesn't look very
update or
good.
something, but.
I'll try. Yeah, so I-
We can talk about it
Yeah.
at our next meeting tomorrow. But that's just, I guess, my thoughts on how to pull this one together.
So on the calendar that I have here, you have on February 21st, the warrant delivered to the post office and mailed to residents. That's after it's been coming back from the printers, correct?
Yes, oh
Okay.
yeah. It goes to the printer on the 10th,
On the 10th, okay.
and it's the final, yeah,
Which is a
Okay.
Monday. right?
yeah.
So I think then, at this point, we're probably going to need to have a public hearing on the 6th.
An additional public hearing, or?
Well, in order to do the vote, we would have to do the public hearing for it, I believe.
We don't need a public hearing to vote on the warrant, what our write-up is.
No, well, okay. As long as we're just doing that, but as far as the capital portion of it, if we don't have all the capital stuff ahead of time.
Well, do you anticipate having the capital by next week?
I had hoped to have it sooner,
Okay.
but
So there should be
I
nothing
can't
else
predict
outstanding by
the
the
weather
time we get a
either.
public hearing.
Correct, but do we want to have it posted at least, just in case? So that is our absolute last day, that we would be able to do anything to get it in time to get to the printer.
Having a meeting or having a public hearing?
Having a potential public hearing.
I mean, I don't mind, but, yeah, I don't know why we would need to, I guess, is what I'm struggling with.
Well, depending upon how far we get through with numbers in here next week. If we get more, if there's a substantial number of figures that are missing out of here by next week's meeting, that would be the reason for having a second public hearing prior to the warrant going to the printer. Or we just leave everything as deferred to town meeting. The problem is that we have to make the choice soon so that we can get it posted in time, so that it gets to the ledger and it
Yeah, you know I'm always an advocate for having that additional public hearing if new numbers come forward.
right.
Totally with you on that. I'm just trying to wrestle with the votes on recommendation and the write-up that we put in the warrant.
Those, as long as we have enough numbers by the 30th, then we should be able to get through the majority of them, and we would ideally have the write-up done by the 30th and voted on as well, assuming that we have the capital numbers before that as well. There's,
Okay, but that's next week, and we would have no time then to deliberate or take any discussion on the capital and what we,
correct.
that's why, I mean, I really think we need that meeting of the week of the 6th to be able to do that.
Agreed. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying as well.
Okay. I just don't know why it needs to be another public hearing.
For the letter, it does not.
Okay.
But for the vote, it would need, if we were going to take any votes on the warrant articles, it would need to be a public hearing, I believe. Is that correct? If we were to take any votes, or can we vote on the warrant outside of a public hearing?
Yes, vote on recommendations at town meeting as well. It's more for the public to hear information on whatever that article is the public hearing intent.
So I see high likelihood that on the 6th, the 13th, or the 20th, we will need maybe an additional public hearing leading into town meeting.
But putting it on the 6th doesn't give us that much more time versus putting it on the 20th, where we would have more time, and we could just do,
Right, this is
just defer for the warrant.
just defer for whatever didn't make it in time for the warrant.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? A second public hearing later in the month of April?
I think that makes sense.
Jay?
It doesn't hurt to schedule one. We don't have to use it. We don't.
Okay. All right, so I will, let's see, if we have, so I think it makes sense to at least schedule the meeting on the 6th, because that allows us to have one more night to deliberate anything we want to do with the letter or anything else prior to it going to the printer on the 8th,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
not as a public hearing.
it does put a crunch on town manager and getting the warrant pulled together, but we're in kind of a crunch situation on all sorts of factors this year. New governor,
Yeah. Okay.
abatements.
So the 13th would be a regularly scheduled meeting as far as the charter goes. So we can choose to have that meeting, or we can choose to skip that meeting and just go on the 20th and have a public hearing then.
Yeah, we could do or even the 27th, maybe. I mean, it doesn't seem like, we can call, I guess we could make the call as we get closer, but,
So long as we have, I believe it's 2 weeks notice to post the public hearing. Bless you. Okay. That works. So I think by next week then, we would have to decide what we want to do. At that point, we can say, what do we want to have, when we want to have the next public hearing, but we will probably have to have one more at least. Okay. Excellent. Do we want to have any discussion on the tax assessment and abatements? I haven't seen much new coming out, actually. I am glad to see that, at least from my perspective on social media, it seems to have quieted down at least a little bit, but that may just be the algorithm not showing me stuff.
yeah. This whole thing on when it was postmarked is kind of an interesting, and part of my initial thoughts, but it shouldn't take 11 days to get to it. But
Thankfully, that's not for us to decide,
we're waiting.
nor deliberate, nor fix, nor worry about, well, concern other than general public. All right, moving on to minutes then. The minutes from our last meeting on the 9th were posted. Has everyone had a chance to look them over?
I have.
Any issues with anything? I didn't see anything that I could find.
Nope, looks good.
All right, I would happily entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve the March 9th meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We are unanimous.
So just, there's some housekeeping needed in our folders, because there's a lot of minutes in review still, so, okay,
I went and looked, yeah, at the 9th meeting, we did, at the meeting on the 9th, we did approve the minutes from the 16th, I believe, as well. So we can, everything before, actually, everything that's in there now
we're all caught up.
is completely good, I think. Because we figured out we fixed that one issue.
Do we need to put out minutes from the meeting we had with the representatives?
We do, because we were actually in a meeting.
Okay.
I will work on that when I get time.
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
That's what Michael Ray suggested that.
I'm fine with that
Yeah,
approach.
just fine, yeah. Just cut and delete a whole bunch, or highlight and delete a whole bunch of it.
Real quick though, are we sure we approved the February minutes from the last meeting?
The February 16th?
Yeah, because maybe we approved it on March 2nd. I can go back and look, but I'm just looking at the last ones and they're not in there, so I don't know if we did.
I looked at them earlier today. The 9th, I believe, had,
Let me look at the 2nd. Maybe that's when we approved them. We approved the minutes from February 23rd on the 2nd, and that was it. And on the 23rd, oh, we did both of them then?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
we should be good, I think. I think we're all caught up now.
Last year, we had a backlog of like 20 minutes, I think.
Well,
20
that's because we
meetings.
decided, to actually have other people do them, and, that was horrible.
Yeah, it was.
Never again. All right, I am happy to postpone committee reports at 10 o'clock at night unless anybody really wants to say anything about committees. Excellent. Same with future meetings. I'm happy to talk about that tomorrow. Is there any public comment from the committee before we adjourn?
No.
Any public comment from anybody left? Nope, seeing none. Upcoming meetings, we're meeting here again tomorrow night for PAC, for sewer, for fire, and for other moneyed articles. So that should be a slightly shorter one. And then our public hearing is on the 30th, at 7 o'clock, 7:05. We'll vote on recommendations, and we will have another meeting on the 6th of April as well. With that, I would happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. At 10:01, we are adjourned.